Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it. People are asking me, please, 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 Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning in our country. Until you came along, we're just always losing, but now we're winning too much. And I say, no, no, no. You're going to win again. You're going to win big. You're going to win bigger than ever.
Voted for the president, supported him, but I really want to apologize. All this man does is tell lies. He is not worthy of the presidency. He takes bribes blatantly, and now he's being a racist blatantly. They were supposed to deport the dangerous criminals. They were not supposed to go after small children, storm schools, bring terror upon, the little kids and the women and children, not just the immigrants in the school. All the children are scared. This is not a decent man. This is not an honest man. He openly takes bribes. He's pathetic as a president, and I just want to apologize to everybody in the country for supporting this rotten man. I did. I was sucked into the stupidity of creating jobs, and there are no more jobs.
You're going to protect pedophiles. You're going to protect pedophiles rather than go after them and hope that everybody's happy that the Dow hit 50,000. Are you fucking out of your mind? Never seen so many fucking lies appear in, a year? It's only been a fucking year. Look at all the fucking lies.
Another really bad sign for Donald Trump is the sudden cultural shift. A year ago, it seemed like everybody wanted to be on the MAGA bandwagon, but fast forward to today, and the grifters and wave riders are now realizing that the cultural winds have shifted yet again. For example, you have podcaster bros like Andrew Schulz go from, bragging about voting for Donald Trump because he gets pussy to admitting that the left was right about Donald Trump all along. There's also Anna Kasparian, who went from denying that Trump was a fascist to apologizing for doing that and admitting that she felt stupid for doing it, which she should. But I think that these people, the ones that don't have any actual core beliefs, that simply say what they think people want to hear so they can attract big audiences, they are the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, for Trump's popularity, because the fact that the people who don't believe anything suddenly have to pretend that they're against Donald Trump, that is a pretty telling sign that the ship is sinking. But let's hear from Trump voters themselves, because surprise, surprise, they're suddenly turning on him now that they're feeling the effects of his policies. Newsbreak shared a quote from a 49-year-old West Virginian man who says, "I voted for Trump all 3 times. This time I felt like I didn't have a choice because the Democratic candidate was so bad. I've never felt more betrayed by my vote. My partner is losing her federal job, will probably lose our house, and ICE is running rampant above the law with no regard for anyone." This Redditor claims they were an enthusiastic Trump supporter who even wore Latinos for Trump and LGB for Trump shirts, but feels scorned after ICE kidnapped his sister, who's a U.S. citizen. And on a similar note, a 59-year-old grandmother who's a green card holder spent nearly 5 months in ICE detention because she bounced a $25 check more than a decade ago. And while she was in an ICE concentration camp, her husband Jim, who voted for Trump in 2024, was panicked, and he wrote to every congressperson in Missouri, but only got a response from a Democrat from Rhode Island who invited him to speak before a panel about his wife's detention. And as the Washington Post reports, at the event, Jim was asked why he voted for Donald Trump. He paused and said, "Because I was an idiot." But even though he eventually got his wife back, he did lose friends for criticizing Donald Trump. Quote, "The partisan backlash has been swift," he said. "Longtime friends in the Ruby Red County, where the couple lives, have turned their back on him because he criticized Trump. Meanwhile, more liberal neighbors have said his wife's ordeal is a fitting consequence of his vote." But what's crazy is that even fascist politicians from other countries are feeling the pain of Donald Trump's policies. I say this because far-right Colombian Congresswoman Angela Vergara, who was a vocal Trump supporter in 2024 and even founded Latinas for Trump and even celebrated Trump's deportations of Colombians, people from her own country, she posted a tearful video to social media after her son, who was in America, was kidnapped by ICE and held in inhumane conditions in an ICE concentration camp. And she pleaded with Petro's government for help to get him free. But back in the U.S., specifically in Michigan, Al Jazeera reports that some Yemeni many American Trump supporters are speaking out after his regime revoked the temporary protected status for their community. Quote, people feel betrayed. They feel backstabbed, Wali Al-Tahif, a Yemeni American activist in Dearborn, said, adding that the decision to revoke TPS for Yemen will likely separate families in the community. Quote, there was hope that he was going to bring a different direction, different policy towards Yemen and the Yemeni community, but we've seen the opposite, absolutely the opposite. Now, Arab Americans were right to feel betrayed by Democrats in 2024, seeing as how Kamala Harris basically gave them the finger while their administration was giving Israel the bombs that they were dropping on the heads of their family members in Palestine. So I fully understand why they felt so mad and why so many of them chose to stay home or vote third party. But this individual affirmatively voted for Donald Trump, which I just can't rationalize, seeing as how, one, it was clear that Trump would be worse on Israel-Palestine than Kamala Harris, and two, in Trump's first term, he literally vetoed a bill that would have ended our government's complicity with Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. So I feel like a lot of people, they lie to themselves and they tell themselves that his cruelest policies won't affect them. But so many of them are finding out the hard way that that's simply not the case, which is why I think it's more important than ever to try to foster universal solidarity. Because even if you might not be personally affected by something immediately, it will catch up to you at some point. This is why immigrant rights is your fight too, even if you're not an immigrant. It's why trans rights is your fight too, even if you're not trans. It's why Palestinian rights is your fight too, even if you're not Palestinian, because if you give the government permission to violate the human rights of one group of people, you're giving them permission to do it to you too, albeit at a later date. We have to recognize our collective humanity and internalize the struggle of all marginalized people if we ever want things to change, because we're just not free until everyone is free. And I try to refrain from saying that term because I think a lot of people think it's a cliche, but I promise you it is the absolute truth. You have to fight for liberation of all marginalized people if you truly want to live in a free society and be free yourself. But I don't want to make it seem like Trump supporters are just like, they're not coming to their senses until their lives are ruined by his policies, because some of them, they're just starting to realize things aren't getting better, and that's all they needed to turn away from him. Case in point, Navigator published results from a focus group featuring 2024 Trump voters from battleground states, and unlike the New York Times focus group we looked at earlier, these Trump voters were much more critical because their lives simply aren't getting better fast enough. Here's some quotes. All of our prices have gone sky high for necessities. Our utilities have raised, our mortgage, the interest rates, the food in the grocery store. Everything has gone up except my wages, and it's making it harder and harder to make ends meet. Wages are not keeping up with expenses. Basically, what I'm seeing is that corporations are going to start doing a lot better than they have, and regular people are not going to be doing so great. So overall, the economy is going to have some great numbers, but you're not going to see that in your wallet. And to add insult to injury, they also feel like Trump isn't even trying to make things better. Here's some more quotes. People voted for Trump because we thought we were going to get lower costs of living, to some degree at least, and everything has just increased in price. I have an EBT card, and it's a lot harder to prove certain things in order to qualify for that. So just little things like that, they all add up, and I think that they need to focus more on us rather than on other countries. I have a lot of folks that rely on the Obamacare health exchanges, and health insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and there's not even really a plan in place for how to address that kind of front and center. Trump said one of his biggest and first actions when he was in office was to handle inflation, and that was not done. That was backed off and not put as a priority, and it's still an issue for all of the American people. And we're not going to go through all of this, but they're also vocally dissatisfied with the mass deportation policy that they voted for. And get this, some even liken Trump's actions to a Hitler-style dictator and refer to ICE as the Gestapo. So it seems like once they fight through the cognitive dissonance and admit that they're disappointed, that's when they'll finally start to condemn the cruelty towards other people, even if it doesn't affect them personally. So they'll basically deny that he's a fascist right up until they're personally dissatisfied, and once he's no longer meeting their personal expectations, that's when the whole truth comes out. And I kind of get the sense that they knew he would be cruel to immigrants, because how could you not? But they were willing to overlook that so long as they thought that he would improve the economy for them. But, you know, now that we're a year in and things have only gotten worse, they're starting to realize that the trade-off wasn't worth it. See, they'll only tolerate a high level of cruelty insofar as they think the payoff will be lower prices at the grocery store. But if there's no benefit to the cruelty, then they'd rather not see it. At least that's kind of how I interpret what their thinking is. Maybe that's too uncharitable, but I mean, look, it's possible. Some of them still do have hearts, and seeing overt cruelty and racism genuinely does disgust them. That's possible. It is hard to imagine, though, that like you oppose racism and vote for Donald Trump. Like, this seems like two very mutually exclusive things. Like, how could you be against racism and support somebody who's pretty explicitly racist and never even tries to hide it? I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible if you're extremely ignorant, but I mean, one Trump supporter called into C-SPAN and indicated that it really was Trump's overt racism that was the straw that broke the camel's back, even though he too was suckered by the promise of prosperity.
Voted for the president, supported him, but I really want to apologize. I mean, I'm looking at this awful picture of the Obamas. What an embarrassment to our country. All this man does is tell lies. He is not worthy of the presidency. He takes bribes blatantly, and now he's being a racist blatantly. They were supposed to deport the dangerous criminals. They were not supposed to go after small children, storm schools, bring terror upon, the little kids and the women and children, not just the immigrants in the school. All the children are scared. This is not a decent man. This is not an honest man. He openly takes bribes. He's pathetic as a president, and I just want to apologize to everybody in the country for supporting this rotten man.
John, did you vote for him in all three elections?
I did. I was sucked into the stupidity of creating jobs, and there are no more jobs.
So he was pulled in by the promise of jobs in 2016, and presumably the same in 2020 and again in 2024. And then after seeing how unhinged Trump is, he's now realizing, oh, okay, maybe this guy wasn't so great. It's just really hard to believe that. Having said that, though, he does seem genuinely remorseful for his votes, and I felt like he was probably crying. Like, it's hard to tell, but it sounded like he was crying. I don't know. But I feel like the only way you'd only just now find out that Trump is a racist in 2026 is if you've lived in a cave for all of these years. So again, I have no idea if this is a case of, oh, well, now I can admit that he's racist now that I have no incentive to support him, or a case of, oh my God, I supported a monster all these years. What have I done? And maybe just the Obama racist monkey meme is the thing that was the wake-up call for him. I don't know. Unfortunately, I think it's probably the more cynical take because, again, so many Americans, they never even consider how their actions will affect other people until it affects them personally. It's what we're seeing from a lot of the people that we heard from today, and it's what we saw from Trump-supporting farmers who were collectively skull-fucked by his tariffs. But another group that you would never expect to turn on Donald Trump is Republican billionaires. And to be clear, they haven't turned on Donald Trump. I'm sure they're very enthusiastically happy about what they're seeing, but at least one of them has gone on the record and said, hey, this is actually pretty fucked up, because even though he knows what Trump is doing has been amazing for his class, there's one thing that he acknowledges that will one day come back to bite them all in the ass. As Mediaite reports, Republican mega donor Ken Griffin condemned Donald Trump's blatant corruption, and he vocalized fears that billionaires might lose control of the monster that they helped to create, saying business leaders are concerned about getting trapped in a loop of government coercion. And he adds, most CEOs just don't want to find themselves in the business of having to, in some sense, suck up to one administration after another to succeed in running their businesses. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a bad idea to prop up an authoritarian fascist who demands unconditional loyalty, but who knows? Now, to be fair to Ken Griffin, which we don't have to be fair to, by the way, but to be fair to him, he didn't endorse Donald Trump explicitly. Nonetheless, he still supported him in a roundabout way by giving millions and millions of dollars to the Republican Party in 2024. And since the Republican Party is the party of MAGA, he's still emboldened the fascist dictator who he's now complaining about. But a lot of the regretful Trump simps that we've heard from today, they were mostly personally affected by his policies in some way, shape, or form. But some of them, they might not be affected personally, but they're mad because their expectations aren't aren't matching reality. For example, in the podcast sphere, right-wing influencer Sean Ryan recently ranted about how disappointed he was that Epstein's former best friend and his cronies, like Pam Bondi, are handling the Epstein files so goddamn poorly.
What was the excuse? Oh, if we prosecute everybody, the whole system would go down. Well, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like how Trump ran his campaign. Let's drain the swamp. Doesn't that sound a lot like draining the swamp? It actually is drain the swamp served up to you on a fucking silver platter. But you're not going to take it, are you? You're going to protect pedophiles. You're going to protect pedophiles rather than go after them and hope that everybody's happy that the Dow hit 50,000. Are you fucking out of your mind? I guess the whole drain the swamp campaign promise was another fucking bullshit lie, huh? Man, the lies are stacking up fast. I've never seen so many fucking lies appear in, what, a year? It's only been a fucking year. Look at all the fucking lies.
Yeah, man, I just wish that there was a way we could have known that Trump would have been a huge liar. Like if he was president before and told more than 30,000 provable lies or something. If only we had that piece of information, then maybe we could have known that he would have been a little bit dishonest. It's so exhausting. I'm so tired because none of this is surprising to anyone who paid even a little bit of attention. The problem is that Americans don't pay attention, ever. You know, it's partially not their fault since they're tired and overworked, and it really is hard to keep up. But it also is their fault, seeing as how Trump couldn't have possibly been any more clear, and a 5-minute Google search about his policies would have made them infinitely more prepared before they casted their votes. But I don't want to complain too much because it is good to see his support collapse. Like, beggars can't be choosers, so I'm glad this is happening. But the problem is that once you open the door to authoritarianism, it's really fucking hard to close it. I'm crossing my fingers for us, but that's going to require Americans to do the bare minimum and at least try to inform themselves for once if they want to get us out of this mess and not just gobble up bullshit spewed by cable news pundits and podcasters like it's gospel. Stop doing that, and maybe, just maybe, in the future, we'll be in a better place.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版，新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。